Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Amy.
Our project is called Mind, Body, and Soul, The Nature of Well-Being, and this podcast is just one small piece of the overall project. We are making a documentary that follows our hike on the Continental Divide Trail that will explore how spending time in nature affects a person's mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
We are guinea pigs in a sense because we will be documenting our own experiences and recording changes that we find. Along the way, we are interviewing people about their experiences in nature to see how they have been affected.
Much of the benefits that come from being in nature are subjective, and therefore hard to measure in a quantifiable way. That's why we have turned to recording stories as a way to distribute this knowledge. Since the beginning of human culture, we have compressed valuable information into stories, and that's how we have shared wisdom throughout the generations.
We hope that the stories we gathered during this project will help spread some of the wisdom that can be found in the wilderness. Episode 14, an interview with Brady Allen, a true warrior who bravely served his country as a medic in the Iraq War. Now he is embarking on a new journey towards healing and self-discovery by hiking the Continental Divide Trail through the Warrior Expeditions program.
My name is Brady Allen, and my trail name is Mountain Man.
What's your military experience?
So I was in the Marines and the Army. I was only in the Marines briefly. I got injured when I was in training, and then I was in the Army for about 6 years total between active duty and other stuff as a medic.
Sound like you were a police officer too, right?
Yeah, for another couple of years up in the mountains.
Okay. So what was your military experience like?
So in the Marine Corps, I just was in training, so I don't really count that as pretty much anything because I was only in for a little bit less than a year. But in the Army, I deployed twice. So I went to Afghanistan in 2006, and I went to Iraq in 2008, both with 10th Mountain Division, hence the trail name.
What kind of, did you see combat over there, or what was that like?
Yeah, I was our line medic attached to a group of people that were basically doing various things, but mostly it was combat engineers, so a lot of finding IEDs, local construction projects, and then for a period of time in Iraq, I broke my ankle doing just regular dumb stuff, and ended up in the aid station for several months working there. So just all the normal stuff that a medic has to deal with.
Do you feel like you had any traumatizing experiences over there?
Yeah, plenty. Afghanistan, we had quite a few times where thankfully Afghanistan, we were treating local nationals most of the time. We rarely had our own guys who were getting injured, so that was kind of, nice, quote unquote, from a medic standpoint. All of the guys that you're working with, so when they get hurt, it really sucks. So being able to do your job but not on your friends is a little bit nicer. But yeah, I got blown up in Afghanistan from a suicide bomb and some stuff like that. And then Iraq, we were in Baghdad in a really shitty time to be in the area that we were in. And so to be a medic in that area in the time that we were there, we averaged, for a 4 or 5 month period, we averaged at least one major trauma patient a day for 5 months. So yeah, lots of really ugly stuff came through our aid station in that time period. So
How do you think that affected you today?
So I'm an 80% disabled veteran, and 70% of that is from PTSD. I coped with it the way that a lot of medics coped with it, which was basically just by shutting off all my emotions. I got out of the military as basically a robot. I was able to hold a full-time job, work, do the whole, be a productive member of society, but didn't really have friends, didn't have relationships, didn't, interact with people other than my work and, stuff like that, because I didn't want to. I didn't want to get emotionally involved with anybody or anything. And that I was like that for pretty much the 10 years after I got out of the military. So I was able to, function as a member of society, but it wasn't really a life. So, yeah. I didn't start going to counseling for stuff until, 2016-ish, something like that. 2015, 2016, and I got out in 2010. And, got put on medication, did all the stuff that they end up doing a lot of times with vets, and you just kind of don't, you end up feeling worse before you start feeling any better. And it was just it was very hit and miss. So I heard about this program and applied immediately. I wished I had heard about it back in 2013, but didn't find out about it until 2020, and thankfully got accepted and basically dropped everything and got ready to hit the trail.
Nice.
So
when you're over there dealing with all these just horrible injuries, are you kind of so involved in the moment that you're not really thinking about the people that you're dealing with? Like, do you kind of just treat it like a job or a machine that you're fixing?
It depends. There's a level of detachment you have to have just to be able to function. And I think the reason a lot of medics do cope by isolating their emotions is just because you do have to kind of compartmentalize yourself when you're working on somebody. But when you're working on, a friend that you've known for 3 years at that point, and they come in blown to pieces, like, it sucks. But in the moment, you still just have to be like, okay, it doesn't matter if I know this guy and I know his birthday and I know he's got 2 kids. Like, it doesn't matter right now because I need to try and save his life. It's afterwards that it kind of hits you, and you're just like, it just sucks. Like, I had one friend that I worked on that died. I had another 2 or 3 friends that I worked on that had more minor injuries. One guy's in a wheelchair, but everybody else was okay. And then a ton of other people that I didn't know, but they're all, American service members, and it sucks just seeing people come in one after the other. And, our average patient was a multi-system, amputee. So, yeah.
In the military, or even among the medics specifically, how do people deal with this stuff? Do they talk about it? Is there kind of like a tough guy mentality where you don't talk about it?
Lots of dark humor. Medical personnel all over have a pretty twisted sense of humor anyway, and that's absolutely a coping mechanism. You have to joke about that stuff, because otherwise you look at it and it would just be overwhelming. You can't help but kind of get into some of that stuff and have to make jokes out of things. We had stupid stuff. We had a night where we didn't have the scrubs that we would normally wear over our clothes when a detainee or a guy had been injured by a U.S. military attack, as he was an insurgent and was being brought in for treatment before basically he was going to be taken to whatever detainee facility it was. And so we ended up literally all basically crawling inside these giant trash bags and just sticking our hands through holes and taping them as like giant body condoms. We're like, when this dude comes in, he is going to think that he's been abducted by aliens, because that's pretty much what we looked like. And we just, we had to just laugh about it because it was so ridiculous. But yeah, that's the only way you can deal with it, because dealing with the reality of it in the moment would overwhelm anybody, and you wouldn't be able to function. So, yeah.
Are you guys able to help each other out or talk through some of this stuff, or?
Yeah, we all knew we'd all help each other if we were hurting. I had, a couple of, the night Tim got killed, they all knew I had known Tim. I had been working with his unit, with his platoon for 3 years. So they knew I was sucking. They knew that the other medic from his platoon was really hurting that night. So yeah, we all lean on each other and try and be supportive as much as you can. Like, it's a little bit easier when you're all in the same boat. Like, everyone sucks right now. Like, it's a shitty situation. So it's a little bit easier to just, kind of sit there and be like, yeah, like, this is life right now. So, yeah.
So I've heard, I think from podcasts and stuff, from military people on podcasts, that when you're over there, you're in this brotherhood and everybody can kind of relate to each other. And then when you come back into civilian life, it's actually way harder because nobody understands what you're going through.
Yeah, it's really hard to find common ground. It's even hard to find common ground with other medical professionals, because I experienced trauma treatment on a level that most ER physicians will never see. A bad car wreck, you might see an ER physician might see a traumatic amputation 5 or 6 times in a career in a civilian hospital. We were seeing them 5 to 6 times a month. So it's just hard. It's hard to relate to somebody who wasn't there with you, to be like, oh yeah, remember that time the guy came in with no face? Like, there's no relating to that unless you were there and experienced it, So, and a lot of times you end up getting out very shortly after you come back from deployments. In the time that I was in, a lot of our guys were getting what's called stop lost, which is basically you're held over past your end of your contract because you're still deployed. We had a couple of guys who really got screwed. Their end of their contract was like a week after we got in country, and we were deployed for 13 months. So we all were kind of keeping an eye on them of like, are you good, dude? Like, we know you really got shafted on this, so like anything you need, we're there for you. But a lot of us were like that. So you get back from your deployment, and 90 days later you're completely out of the military. And so it's a hell of a shift from Baghdad on a base, getting mortared and rocketed and all this stuff, and then 90 days later you're a civilian. One of the dudes works as was a bartender at 90 days after getting out of Baghdad. I went and was working on my bachelor's degree 90 days later. Like, it's a wild shift for a minute. But in a lot of ways, that's the same reason of why I compensated the way I did with, you just process it as if it's any other situation. You're not dealing with any of the emotions involved in it. You're just dealing with the situation that's directly in front of you.
Do they have any programs for mental illness or mental check?
For active duty or for
when you're coming out?
Yes, they have both post-deployment stuff and stuff for transitioning veterans. They're all crap. But it also is a lot of the fact that when you're first coming back from all those situations, that's the last thing you want to deal with. The joke that we were making when we were over there is like, we don't have post-traumatic stress syndrome, we have continuing traumatic stress syndrome. Like, we're still in the middle of it. And that's kind of how you feel when you're first getting out. Like, it took almost 10 years from me getting out to go get help for this. We had a lot of guys who started committing suicide 8 and 10 years down the road from stuff, because that's when it finally kind of started hitting them. My unit's lost more guys to suicide now than we did in combat, and all of them were, I think the first one was 8 years after we got back. So yes, there are programs. The problem is it requires that you go seek help, which you don't want to, because you get put on medications, you get You get a psychiatrist who's never been in the military, let alone seen combat, trying to talk to you about traumatic events. You get put on medications that make you even more of a robot if you weren't already, or make you gain weight, make you, tired. I'm working on cycling off the medication that I'm on currently, and the biggest problem that I had was at 3 p.m. every day. It made me so damn tired, I just wanted to go and lay down for the rest of the day, and it sucks. So anything you can do that doesn't involve that kind of stuff, that's what you end up wanting to do. So there's no interest in seeking help, because the cure is worse than what you're going through already. A lot of times, it feels like, at least.
So there's no psych eval or anything when you come out?
There are, but a lot of it's, check the box type stuff. It's, did you experience direct fire? Did you experience explosions? Did you experience did you see dead bodies? Did you see whatever? Have you had recurring thoughts of events that led up to the, so it's not that hard to just be like, no, because you just don't want to deal with it. It's just more bullshit at that point, and all you're trying to do is get away from the military. So, yeah. I mean, I didn't get diagnosed with PTSD until 2014.
Okay.
So, and I was out in 2010. So, yeah.
Was there something that made you realize that you wanted to seek help?
Relationships. Had a girlfriend and realized how it was affecting her, and that you're just not emotionally present for anything, and you're not able to be. It's different to be distracted or something like that, but to literally not be able, you understand, you have empathy, you have compassion and all that stuff, but to not be able to be emotionally present when they're going through a tough time, or you're having an argument or whatever, you just it's wrong. You just know that something's really wrong. And yeah, that was pretty much the time where it's like, okay, I got to do something here, because this is not gonna work. So yeah.
So is that when you sought out the therapy and was diagnosed?
That's when I started going to therapy. That's when I got diagnosed with PTSD. That's when I started getting put on medication. They put me on another medication initially that was horrible. I've never had a panic attack in my life until they put me on that medication, and it was like, nope, put me on something else or take me off of this, because the first time you have a panic attack in the middle of a Costco, it's not a good feeling. So yeah, that was 2016-ish, and then yeah, I've basically been doing that on a semi-regular basis until basically COVID hit, and then it screwed everything up.
How did the talk therapy work for you?
Hit and miss. I went through 4 therapists in that time period. The first one I was just awful. Just no rapport, no connection with the guy whatsoever. Got moved to somebody else who I really liked, and they transferred from my VA office 3 weeks after I started seeing them. It's you just start to get to know them, and oh yeah, I like this guy. Oh, I'm moving to Ohio or wherever. It's all right, well, fuck me. And then had another one who was pretty good, and basically got told I'm too screwed up for the VA to be able to schedule me enough appointments with the person on a regular basis. The most they could get me into the VA was once a month. And she's you need to be in here once a week for us to actually make any kind of progress. And the only way to do that was to see an outside person. So they kicked me to the Care in the Community program, which is basically you go and see a private person under the VA's funding. Now it's the Veterans Cares Act or something like that. But that worked pretty well. I ended up going to a civilian practitioner, but he had never been in the military. He had no experience or idea about any of the stuff that I was talking about, but he was a good guy. And I was seeing him up until basically COVID hit, and it screwed up, everything. So, Yeah.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
So you said you jumped on this as soon as you found out about it. When was that again?
I discovered, I don't actually know how I found Warrior Expeditions. I don't remember if it was through Facebook or like it was literally probably one of those like random late night Google searches kind of things where it's like, hey, what's this? Clicked on it like, oh, that's genius. Why didn't anybody think of that before? And that was literally in December of 2020. And the closing date for the application process was later that week. So I did the application and all the documents and all that stuff in like a 2-day period and sent that in. And then the first week of January was when we found out, well, at least that I found out that I had been accepted for the CDT, and was like, and you go in mid-April. It's like, oh shit. So, yeah.
What about the program appealed to you? Like, why did you want to do it?
I already had a lot of outdoors background. Before I had joined the Army, I had done an associate's degree in outdoor education and basically spent 2 years as a ski bum doing backpacking and doing all that stuff anyway. I grew up in Colorado. I was always an outdoors person. So I knew about the Appalachian Trail. I knew about the CDT. I knew about the trails even though I had never done a thru hike. And so to see, I knew about wilderness therapy for veterans. I knew about outdoor therapy programs through Outward Bound and Knowles and like that stuff. I just hadn't heard of Warrior Expeditions before. So when I'm like, oh, they sponsor veterans to go do a thru hike and process all their shit. How was no one doing this before? And, when I found it, I'm like, crap, I wish I'd known this existed in 2013. I would have been applying for it then. But, so it's one of those things where, like, you find it and you're just like, but everything about it was just like, yes, that's exactly the kind of thing that would work. You're removing all outside stressors. You're literally just going out and telling somebody your job is to eat, walk, camp, and repeat for 5 months. That's it. That's exactly what veterans don't get when they get out of the military to be able to handle their stuff. You get out of the military and it's immediately back into life. And so, when I got accepted to the program, like I was sitting there thinking about it, I was like, all right, when was the last time I didn't have a full-time job or full-time commitments? Like, when was the last time in my life that was a thing? It's like 2001. Ever since getting out of the military, especially, like I've always had either full-time education, full-time job, full-time stress. And so it was an opportunity to remove all of that and just deal with it, deal with shit. So, yeah, it's exactly, plenty of veterans aren't going to be right for it because they're not outdoors people. They're not into backpacking. The idea of camping in the woods is miserable to them. But the ability to just take someone and take all of the crap out of their life for a period of time and let them focus on them is huge. So,
what steps did you have to take to do this?
I tried to do some stuff in terms of like getting a leave from absence from work and stuff like that. I basically, when I got accepted to the program, I'm like, that just became my number one priority. Like, I don't have a girlfriend right now. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have a pet. Like, I don't have a bunch of other commitments that would keep me from doing this. So I'm not gonna let anything stop me from being able to do this trip. And so I ended up quitting my job because they wouldn't give me a leave of absence. Ended up selling my house because it was just not worth trying to find a renter for 5 months or whatever it was. And basically said, all right, in September when I'm getting close to being done, I can figure out where I'm going from here, but I'm doing this damn thing. and just literally just dove in head first. So that part of it's been stressful just because there's such a condensed time frame there. But now that we're here, I don't have any of those other stressors. The house is sold. I don't have a job. I'm full on hiker trash for the next 6 months, and that's all I gotta be. So it feels pretty good.
Could you say where we are at in the trail right now, and then talk about how it's been going for you so far?
Sure. So we basically just started. So most people do the CDT, Continental Divide Trail, from south to north. So it starts at Crazy Cook Monument, which is basically at the Mexican border. It's near Antelope Wells is the closest border crossing. And it runs along the ridge of the mountains, basically all the way to Canada, and ends in Glacier National Park at the Canadian border. And we're 85 miles from the start of it in Lordsburg, New Mexico. So yesterday, because the days start blurring together real quick. Yesterday, our group finished the first 85-mile segment after starting at Crazy Cook on April 15th.
And how's the trail been treating you so far?
My feet are pretty messed up, but I was pretty much expecting it. I'm not in shape. Between COVID and everything else, I was 30 pounds overweight and not in shape for anything. So I fully anticipated the first 2 weeks of this were going to suck something awful. Physical conditioning wise, I've been fine. Like, I'm not, the heat's not been bad. I'm not, falling over trying to pick my pack up or anything like that. It's just been getting my body reaccustomed to hiking and, all that stuff. So, and I'm glad that we took a rest day today, but I'll be ready to move on tomorrow and head up to Silver City. So,
do you guys stick together in a pretty close group, or do you have time to hike on your own?
Everybody kind of, it depends on the person. So the 6 of us have kind of split up into different groups based on people's paces. But you're under no obligation to hike with each other. So I am the slowest one walking just because I'm not trying to get injured. So I'm hiking quite slow and taking my time. And so I'm always the last one into any of the little areas and all that stuff. And so I've been hiking by myself and camping by myself for most of the last 5 days. And that's fine. Like, it's no big deal. There's a couple of us that have been hiking together and, leapfrogging here and there and other stuff. So most of the time, just given the remoteness of the trail, you're pretty much hiking by yourself and maybe, camping with other people or stuff like that. But most of the day, you're by yourself. In the 5 days between Crazy Cook and here, I was camped with other people 2 of those nights. And all the rest of the time I was camped alone, and most of the time during the day I was hiking alone. So, yeah.
With spending all that time alone, is that kind of different than what you're used to, like with the life that you just kind of left?
Yes and no. No, in that I was stuck working from home for the last year anyway, so I was pretty much alone in my house working. The difference is I had different responsibilities. I had work, or I had other distractions. I had the computer, I had a TV, I had, stuff like that, where you can kind of keep yourself occupied. When you're out hiking on the trail and you don't have cell phone reception for 3 days, like, your options are, you have to keep yourself occupied because there's nothing else. So it's a lot of talking to yourself and, maybe listening to music if you've downloaded it to your phone or whatever. And I've been staying busy by taking pictures and shooting video and stuff, so that, you end up kind of talking to yourself, but you're talking to your audience. And that weird, like, vlogger thing of, I'm not talking to myself, I'm vlogging, but you're talking to yourself and doing that. So, yeah.
That's what something that took me a long time to get used to.
Talking to the camera. Yeah. I'm used to doing it on my motorcycle because that's normally when I do my vlog stuff, and so that's a little bit easier because basically it's in your helmet, so it's recording anything that you say. So yeah, you can kind of just jabber and then deal with it in the editing later. But yeah, it takes some getting used to like let your internal monologue not be internal. Because otherwise you just have these really long awkward periods of silence of like, what am I doing? So yeah. Yeah, I know when I go back and edit all my vlog footage, it's a whole bunch of half sentences. Then I stop. Like, what am I trying to say? It's super messy, but then you piece it all together. Yep, that's what editing's for. So during this alone time, have you had thoughts come up that maybe you haven't thought about or kind of avoided thinking about? Like, are you starting to process some stuff, or has it not been long enough on the trail yet? It kind of hasn't been long enough. This is also, so this happens to just be the time period where a lot of the anniversaries are coming up for various things. So, like, April 15th was the day after one of our other friends got killed when we were in Baghdad. The 28th is the anniversary of one of our major attacks. The 7th was actually the anniversary of... We found out that one of our other guys got killed in a car accident just this year on the 7th, and then one of our other guys got killed in Baghdad on the 7th. And so April was a rough month for us, but also we ended up joking about it being March Madness and that stuff when we were over there. But it started in March and it went all the way to basically August, and so a lot of anniversaries over this period of time where you're like, oh yeah, that's where I was, in 2008 and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's only been 5 days, so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's 5 days, but I got 5 more months of this stuff, so don't really need to sit there and like really get into my own head too much right now. I can just kind of experience the experience. Yeah, and at this point in the trail, you're just trying to get used to trail life and adjusting your body and like find the damn route and not get lost and not have border patrol have to come rescue you, and yeah. Do you anticipate kind of diving into that stuff later on? I mean, it's gonna come up at some point. It's 5 months of alone time in your own head. Like, it was a significant, it's some of the most defining moments in my life. So it's gotta come up at some point. How do you feel about diving into that stuff? Is that kind of a scary thing, or are you kind of ready to deal with it? It's not a pleasant thing because it's basically all of the worst experiences of your life. But at the same time, I also know that it's a necessary thing. The thing that I think about is the Marcus Luttrell. He wrote the book Lone Survivor that they did the movie of and all that stuff. He talked about it in one of the interviews they did to him of like, all anybody ever wants to talk to me about is the worst day in my life. And that's what he's famous from. And it's kind of, I understand how he feels of like, the whole reason I'm doing this is because of all of the worst moments in my life. And so, I know you talked to Michelle, and like one of the things she talked about was that there's no cure for trauma. You're just trying to find coping mechanisms. And right now we have a lot of people with very unhealthy coping mechanisms for the worst events that they experienced. So the hope is that you can develop some healthy coping mechanisms while you're out on the trail to move on and go forward from there. Like, you never forget that stuff. You can't. But you can hopefully at least work with it, That's a good way to think about it. I think that's a realistic way to think about it, too. Yeah, the memories aren't going away. There's no way to forget a lot of the stuff that you deal with when you're in situations like that. The only thing you can do is accept that it's a memory and, I guess go from there. Okay. Anything you would tell to other veterans who might be thinking about doing something like this but are hesitant? if it's attractive to you, like if you look at the idea of hiking a trail like this and that seems like fun, apply. It's gonna suck. Like there are definitely a lot of times on the trail where you're just like, why am I doing this to myself? But it's worth it. If this isn't your thing, great. there's other programs out there that will be able to help you find them and find one that you find attractive and go for it. But find the thing that appeals to you to help you move on. Because it's not going to happen on its own. You know, from my own experiences, from all the experiences of my friends, from losing people to suicide over and over in the last few years, like it doesn't go away. It just gets worse. So find whatever is going to help you and latch onto it. You know, we're losing way too many people.
Do you know the statistics on that? I feel like I've heard some crazy numbers.
CDC did a study that estimated 22 are dead a day due to suicide. I don't know how accurate that is. I know that our unit, starting in I can't remember if it was 2015 or 2016 now, but we lost a guy in 2016. We've lost 7 or 8 guys since 2016, and that's just from the 300 of us, or 3 or 500 of us that were in our battalion. And I guarantee you there's ones that we don't know about because we don't all stay in touch, you know. So yeah.
These guys that you're out here with right now, were you guys in the same unit?
No, none of us knew each other from the military. Ironically, 2 of us were actually at the same post, very close together, but we didn't know each other. But no, none of us knew each other when we were in the military. We all met here. But anybody in the military, it's pretty easy to make bonds pretty quick. You know, you have a pretty close connection or common experience to lean on. So you'll see a pretty easy rapport between a lot of military veterans very quickly, because a lot of it's a shared language. You know, there's a language that you use in the military that you don't use anywhere else that is easy to fall onto. And so you'll hear us talk about stuff that you have no idea what the hell we're talking about. But any veteran is like, oh yeah. So, yeah.
One of my best friends was in the Marines, and he's just like that. He can just like pick out a guy at the bar or something.
Oh yeah, it's not hard. It's not hard, yeah.
If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe, where you'll find a lot of videos that have similar themes.